"No!" he screams, desperately pleading with the faces in the crowd as two armored guards drag him forward. A woman with a golden halo watches from her throne, her expression cold and final as she raises an elegant finger. With a quiet, dismissive snap, the stone floor beneath him vanishes, replaced by a bottomless black pit. He plummets into the suffocating darkness, his terrified scream echoing up from the void as the world he just entered disappears from sight. In a desolate, rocky wasteland, a colossal dragon made of stone and shadow towers over two small figures. A young man sits defeated on the broken ground, looking up in despair, while a determined young woman stands beside him, gripping a staff. Above the great beast, a blur of dark energy reveals someone in the middle of a ferocious attack. The scene flashes to the young man's face, tears streaming down his cheeks. He cries out, his mind screaming about how utterly weak he is. A first-year student who's terrible at fighting and is even too scared to watch horror movies. Suddenly, a futuristic screen materializes, identifying the beast as the dreaded Abyss Dragon, a creature last seen in battle over 43 million years ago. With this terrifying information revealed, the ancient dragon lets out a deafening, world-shaking roar. The dragon's roar is so powerful that the very ground cracks and shatters beneath it. At the same time, another message flashes on the screen, mysteriously announcing that a replication calculation is starting. A shadowy figure moves with impossible speed, a blur of pure motion and power, effortlessly cutting through the chaos of the battle. A girl with glasses watches in absolute disbelief as the mighty Abyss Dragon lies defeated. The young man's voice echoes his own shock, wondering how an inferior high schooler like him could have possibly accomplished something so incredible. The story then rewinds to a time before the great battle, revealing a beautiful, sunlit view of a massive city with a grand castle at its center, the magnificent Holy Kuzurina Empire. Inside a vast cathedral-like hall, a crowd of high school students stands together, looking completely lost and confused. Among them is our protagonist, Yamada Ichitaro, his face etched with worry as his classmates desperately try to figure out where they are and what is happening. A memory flashes by, showing the students sitting calmly on a school bus. They were all together, just moments before being violently ripped from their world. The memory becomes clearer, revealing the exact moment of their arrival. The entire bus was suddenly engulfed by a glowing, intricate magic circle on the ground, lifting them into this strange new place. Standing before them is a breathtakingly beautiful woman with long, flowing hair and a golden halo. She smiles with a kindness that seems to calm their fears and introduces herself as the goddess Kuzuriel, telling the students not to worry because she is protecting this land. The students are completely stunned. They whisper among themselves, utterly captivated by her ethereal beauty and wondering if she could truly be a goddess. The goddess spreads her hand towards the crowd of students, her expression turning somber and serious. She explains that this beautiful country is in grave danger, threatened by a cruel and powerful demon king. She continues her grim tale, explaining that the demon king's monstrous army attacks their world relentlessly, causing the people to live in constant fear and hunger. To answer their desperate prayers for help, she performed a ritual to summon heroes, the students themselves. For a brief moment, the goddess lets out a quiet giggle, looking incredibly pleased with her own kindness for helping the people in their time of need. Just then, a student confidently raises their hand to speak. Yamada turns to see who it is. It is the class representative, Sakushiho-san, a confident and serious-looking young woman who always takes charge. She speaks clearly, asking the question burning in everyone's mind. While she understands the reason for their summoning, she wants to know if it is at all possible for them to return to their own world. The goddess smiles warmly, her expression full of reassurance, and confirms that, yes, it is entirely possible. She explains their one and only path home. They must retrieve the legendary Philosopher's Stone, which was stolen by the Demon King. Once they have it, every single one of them will be able to return. The students look at each other with worried face, the heavy implication of her words slowly sinking in. They can't believe what they are truly being asked to do. A boy with spiky blonde hair and a confident smirk arrogantly steps forward. Yamada immediately recognizes him as Kizugawa-kun, the class leader who often bullies him. Kizugawa boldly asks if the goddess actually expects them to kill the Demon King. The goddess seems amused by his brash confidence. She confirms his suspicion, explaining that only heroes summoned from another world possess the unique power required to defeat the Demon King. Kizugawa scoffs at this, callously reminding her that they are just ordinary high school students and have absolutely no way of fighting such a powerful enemy. "Don't you worry," the goddess says cheerfully, her tone bright and reassuring. She explains that when they were summoned, they were all given a divine blessing, transforming them from ordinary students into powerful heroes. With a grand, sweeping gesture, she calls upon their newfound power. She tells them to bring forth their sacred gear, and instantly glowing weapons begin to materialize in the students' hands. The goddess explains that these sacred gears are special weapons for heroes, forged from the hidden potential sleeping deep inside each of them. The students stare at their new weapons in awe. One student brandishes a sturdy shield, another a mighty axe, and a third holds a sharp spear. They quickly learn that these weapons have ranks, like A and B, which signify their power. A buzz of raw excitement fills the hall as students admire their glowing gear. Yamada looks on, feeling a knot of nervousness and anticipation in his stomach as he wonders what his own weapon will be. Suddenly, a brilliant light shines in front of Kisogawa, and a magnificent, beautifully decorated sword materializes out of thin air. Kisogawa's eyes light up with pure, unadulterated excitement. He exclaims how incredibly cool it is, calling it a golden sword fit for a king. The goddess looks overjoyed, her voice ringing with triumph. She announces that he has received the best possible weapon, the legendary holy sword, Excalibur, a weapon of the highest S rank. The other students gasp in shock and envy. They all know the name Excalibur from video games, where it is always the most powerful sword imaginable. Kisogawa greedily grabs the handle of his new sword, a cruel, power-hungry smile spreading across his face as he imagines himself becoming the strongest. Completely satisfied, the goddess prepares to move on, assuming everyone has now received their weapon. But then, Yamada steps forward timidly. He holds up a plain, pathetic-looking wooden stick with a tiny leaf growing from its side and tells the goddess that she hasn't checked his sacred gear yet. The entire room falls dead silent as everyone turns to stare at Yamada and his simple, ridiculous-looking stick. A moment later, the silence is broken by loud, mocking roars of laughter from his classmates. Completely flustered, Yamada tries to defend his weapon, weakly suggesting that it might be more amazing than it looks. He stands alone in the center of the hall, looking up at the goddess on her throne. She looks down at him with a cold, dismissive expression, saying she already knows what his weapon is without even needing to check. The goddess announces his fate with a look of pure disgust, her voice dripping with contempt. His weapon is a pathetic rank E, the lowest possible, and she cruelly labels it total garbage. She lets out an annoyed sigh, explaining that sometimes the summoning ritual produces duds or failure heroes. Yamada's face turns pale with shock and dawning fear. His classmates begin to mock him again, shouting that the title failure hero is absolutely perfect for a loser like him. The goddess raises her hand and points a single, elegant finger directly at Yamada, singling him out for judgment. Her voice is cold and chillingly final. She declares that a failure like him is a stain on her divine reputation, and therefore must be disposed of. Yamada's world completely shatters. His eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror as he desperately tries to understand what disposal actually means. The goddess explains calmly as if she were discussing the weather. He is to be taken to a dungeon and simply left there to die. "No!" Yamada cries out in a blind panic. He can't believe it. Deep down, he's horrified that she's talking about murder so casually, as if his life means absolutely nothing. He shouts that what she is doing is a crime, but the goddess simply tilts her head, her expression one of amused curiosity as she questions his naive words. In that moment, Yamada realizes with a jolt of ice-cold fear that she can read his mind. A wicked, triumphant smile spreads across the goddess's face. She leans forward and informs him that in her country, she alone is the one who decides what is law and what is justice. As two guards seize Yamada's arms to drag him away, he desperately looks to his classmates for help. He pleads with them, asking if they don't see how monstrously unfair this is. But a cold voice from the crowd cruelly replies that it seems perfectly fine to them. Kisogawa steps forward, his new Excalibur resting arrogantly on his shoulder. With a cruel grin, he announces that they don't need weak, E-rank trash like Yamada, who would only slow them all down. He looks around at the other students, and they nervously agree with him, terrified of being the next one to be called out and discarded. Just then, a single, determined voice cuts through the crowd. It's the class representative, Saku-san. Her face is filled with worry as she says that what they are doing is just too cruel. Hearing her voice, Yamada's eyes fill with tears of sudden, desperate hope. For a fleeting moment, he believes that she might actually be able to save him. He thinks to himself that Saku-san will surely stand up for him. But the goddess interrupts from her throne, her voice sickeningly sweet, but her words a terrible, undisguised threat. She warns Saku-san that if she dares to defy her, she will be thrown into the dungeon right alongside the trash. The goddess raises a finger to her lips in a silencing gesture, her eyes glinting with pure malice. Sakusan freezes in terror, completely unable to say another word. With the last bit of resistance crushed, the goddess announces that the disposal is confirmed. With a casual, almost bored snap of her fingers, the goddess whispers a final, dismissive, "Goodbye." In an instant, the floor beneath Yamada vanishes, and he plummets into a dark, bottomless pit, screaming in terror as he falls away from the world he had only just entered. Far away, in a massive library filled with endless shelves of books, a mysterious girl with blonde hair watches the entire event unfold, as if on a screen. She quietly comments on the cruelty she has just witnessed. Yamada lands with a hard, painful thud on a cold, rocky floor. He pushes himself up, dazed and bruised, looking around the dark and unfamiliar place, desperately wondering where he is. He finds himself utterly alone in a huge, dark cave. Sharp, menacing rock formations hang from the ceiling like the giant teeth of some great beast, and he is just a small, lonely figure in the vast, suffocating darkness. Before he can even process what has happened, a terrifying roar echoes through the cave. A gigantic, monstrous bear, its body covered in hideous scars, stands before him, ready to attack. Yamada's face twists in pure terror. He can only let out a choked, helpless scream as he stares up at the giant beast. The goddess's cruel words ring in his ears, a haunting reminder that he was abandoned here with the sole purpose of dying. As he scrambles away in fear, he thinks of his classmates, the ones he foolishly thought were his friends, and how every single one of them turned their backs on him. A wave of crushing despair washes over him. It's so unbelievably unfair to be thrown away and called useless, just because he isn't a powerful fighter. He clutches his wooden stick, his so-called sacred gear. He thinks that maybe it is pathetic, maybe it is completely useless for fighting, but the thought of being discarded for something so trivial fills him with a sudden, defiant burst of rage. He cannot and will not accept this fate. He runs to the cave wall, pounding his fists against the unmoving rock, screaming in a fit of frustration and pure, animalistic fear. The giant bear seems to watch him with a cruel, almost human-like smile, as if it's thoroughly enjoying his hopeless, pathetic struggle. Completely defeated, Yamada collapses against the wall, a terrible thought creeping into his mind. Am I really going to die in a place like this? A single, lonely tear rolls down his cheek as he realizes he might die all alone, with no one to say goodbye to. His mind drifts back to a painful memory, a clean, quiet hospital room where his grandfather lay weak and frail in bed. He sees himself as a younger boy, entering the room and apologizing to his grandpa for being late from his part-time job. In the memory, he holds up a basket of fresh peaches, smiling warmly as he tells his grandpa he bought his favorite kind for them to share. His grandpa, looking frail and terribly tired, softly calls his name Ichitaro. With a sad, regretful look in his eyes, his grandpa apologizes, telling Ichitaro that he doesn't have much time left and is so sorry for leaving him all alone. Ichitaro tries to stay positive, forcing a smile as he asks his grandpa why he is saying such sad things. The memory of a family photo appears. He recalls how his parents died when he was only 5, and his grandpa was the one who raised him ever since. His grandpa's voice tells him how incredibly proud he is of him. His grandpa continues, listing all the sacrifices Ichitaro made, working so hard in school and at his job, giving up his own dreams just so he wouldn't be a burden. But Ichitaro simply smiles, telling his grandpa that he did all of it because he wanted to, because he loved him. Trying to lift his spirits, he excitedly tells his grandpa that he's planning a trip for them to a nearby hot spring. He explains that he has saved up his money and that they will go together as soon as his grandpa gets out of the hospital. But as he speaks, he sees his grandpa's eyes flutter closed. His grandpa's breathing becomes shallow and weak. Ichitaro looks on, his smile fading as he desperately calls out his name. His grandpa's last words echo in his memory. He begged Ichitaro to never, ever give up on life, promising that good things will happen as long as he's alive. He asked him to do it for his sake and for his parents' sake. "Keep on living," his grandpa had whispered. The memory ends with young Ichitaro crying uncontrollably over his grandfather's bed, his promise sealed in a moment of absolute heartbreak. Back in the dark dungeon, the memory ignites a new strength within Yamada. His eyes burn with fiery determination as he declares, "No, I don't want to die." He stands up, defiantly facing the monster. He thinks of the promise he made and knows he cannot break it, especially not at the very end. He screams at the top of his lungs, his voice filled with a raw, desperate passion. "I made a promise. I'm going to live, I'll survive, and get out of here." With a final, powerful roar, he shouts, "And I'll be happy!" Driven by the sacred promise to his grandfather, Yamata charges forward, holding his simple wooden stick like a legendary sword. The giant bear monster looks down at the small boy charging at it, a look of utter amusement on its cruel face. But as he gets closer, cold reality hits him like a punch to the gut. There is no special power awakening inside him. He is still just a weak boy with a stick. He looks down and whispers a heartbroken apology to his grandpa. He falls to his knees, his brief moment of courage completely gone. He closes his eyes, accepting that he couldn't keep his promise as the monster's massive claw swings down to crush him into oblivion. But the fatal blow never lands. Miraculously, at the very last second, a brilliant shield of magical light erupts in front of him, effortlessly blocking the attack. Standing between him and certain death is a mysterious young woman holding a glowing staff. The mysterious woman lets out a sigh, scolding him gently. She calls him a foolish boy for trying to fight a deadly death bear all by himself. Yamata looks up at his savior, completely confused. She has blonde hair just like the goddess, but he can instinctively tell she is someone completely different. The shock of it all is simply too much. Yamata feels his strength leave him, and his vision begins to fade as he whispers, I can't stay," before collapsing into unconsciousness. Having been saved at the last possible moment, the overwhelming relief and exhaustion are too much for Yamata to bear. He feels his consciousness slipping away into darkness. Yamata's eyes snap open. He sits up suddenly, finding himself not in a dark, dangerous cave, but in a soft, impossibly comfortable bed. He looks around and realizes he is in a huge, beautifully decorated room. The bed is large and fancy, and he feels completely out of place as he wonders where in the world he is. A calm female voice gently asks if he is awake. Yamata quickly turns his head towards the sound. His gaze travels up, and he is stunned to see that the room is actually a massive library with shelves that reach the impossibly high ceiling. And floating calmly in the air is the person who spoke. His eyes widen in pure shock. He stammers in disbelief, asking who she is and how she is floating in midair. The woman sits calmly in a floating chair, gracefully sipping from a teacup. She has short blonde hair and wears glasses. She tells him not to worry, that he is safe here, and introduces herself as Ulquiorra. Yamata is completely captivated by her. He blushes furiously, thinking to himself that she is the most beautiful person he has ever seen. As he stares, he gets a strange feeling of déjà vu. He thinks he has seen her somewhere before, but he can't quite place where. Still blushing like a schoolboy, he shyly introduces himself as Ichitaro Yamada and asks for her name, completely forgetting that she just told him a second ago. Just then, he looks down at himself. He is shocked to see that his torn and dirty clothes are perfectly clean, and the arm that the monster had injured is completely healed. Ulquiorra explains calmly, raising a finger as little sparkles of magic appear. She tells him she used recovery magic to heal his arm and magically mend his clothes. Her words bring back the terrifying memory of the death bear. He remembers the feeling of its claws and the absolute certainty that he was about to die. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Yamata drops to the floor and bows deeply, his head touching the ground. He thanks her again and again, his voice cracking with emotion, for saving his life. Ulquiorra looks completely flustered by his sudden and intense display of emotion, asking him why he is acting so strangely. With tears in his eyes, Yamata looks up at her, explaining that she rescued him just as he was about to be killed by that horrible monster. Ulquiorra blushes and turns away, defensively denying that she saved him for any personal reason. For a terrifying moment, Yamata imagines that she is the real monster, who only saved him so she could eat him herself. Ulquiorra shouts in frustration that he's completely, utterly wrong. She struggles to find the right words, saying only that he just so happened to be in a dangerous place at the time. Finally, she blurts out that she only helped because she didn't want her beautiful garden to be stained with his blood. Yamata is completely stunned. He can't believe she keeps a monster like a death bear in her garden and shouts this out in disbelief. Ulquiorra sighs and rubs her forehead, admitting that he is a very strange boy who really knows how to get under her skin. Changing the subject, she looks at him seriously and asks if he is the discarded hero who was abandoned by the goddess Kuzuriel. The memory of the goddess's cruel declaration flashes in his mind, the words "disposed of" echoing in the grand hall. Yamata looks down sadly and admits that he is. Ulquiorra lets out a sigh, saying that she thought so. He tries to make excuses for the goddess, pathetically saying that he is too weak and would only have been a burden in the fight against the demon king. "Oh, that's a lie," Ulquiorra says simply, her words cutting through the air like a knife. Yamata's whole body goes stiff with shock. She reveals a terrible, earth-shattering secret. The demon kings are no longer a threat. The goddess Kuzuriel only summons heroes to use them as puppet weapons to protect her country, all for her own selfish, twisted reasons. Yamada is horrified. He thinks of his classmates, realizing with dawning dread that they are all being tricked and used by that wicked goddess. He asks Ulquiorra if any of the past heroes ever found out about the lies and tried to fight back. She confirms that they did, but the outcome was always tragic. She tells him that every single hero who resisted was thrown away, right here in this very place, the dreaded prison of time. She explains that this dungeon is a rift in space-time. Time flows differently here, and a person cast into this void will never grow old or feel hungry. Because of an ancient rule that gods cannot directly kill humans, Kuzuriel gets around it by throwing them here. Their only escape is to be eaten by monsters or go completely insane from the endless, crushing loneliness. Yamada is speechless. The goddess's cruelty is beyond anything he could have possibly imagined. To summon people for her own convenience, lie to them, and then discard them like common trash. After a moment of heavy silence, his expression changes from horror to a soft, gentle look of admiration. He looks at Ulquiorra with pure, heartfelt gratitude, thinking that even in this horrible place, a truly kind person saved someone as worthless as him. Ulquiorra looks annoyed, telling him to stop looking at her with such a sappy expression. She stands up and tells him plainly that she has no intention of helping him any further, which comes as a complete shock to Yamada. She explains that she is a hermit who has cut all ties with the outside world. From this moment on, she wants absolutely nothing to do with him. Her eyes fill with a distant, deep sadness as she says she has decided never to get deeply involved with people ever again. Yamada watches silently as she turns her back and begins to walk away, leaving him behind. "I understand," he suddenly shouts, running towards the exit. "I'll leave right away. Thank you so much for saving me." Ulquiorra turns back, surprised by his sudden and frantic outburst. As he runs, Yamada panics internally. He's sure he did something wrong to upset her, a bad habit he picked up from years of being bullied and trying not to be a bother. He tells himself that he can't be selfish. It was a miracle that a beautiful and kind person like her helped him even once. He can't possibly ask for more. He reaches the grand doors at the end of the library, determined not to be a burden to her for even a second longer. But as he opens the door, he freezes in absolute terror. Outside, in the suffocating darkness, are the giant, shadowy shapes of more terrifying monsters. Their eyes glow menacingly in the dark. Yamada lets out a terrified whimper, his courage vanishing in an instant. He slams the door shut and leans against it, panting heavily. He remembers where he is, the prison of time, a place filled to the brim with monsters. Despair crashes down on him like a tidal wave. His grandpa is gone. His classmates abandoned him. And he can't rely on Ulquiorra. He is completely and utterly alone. He looks down at the only thing he has left, his simple, pathetic wooden stick. But in that moment of total hopelessness, a new feeling begins to grow. His fear slowly turns into steely determination. He knows he is weak, but he promised his grandfather he would live. Clutching his sacred gear, he makes a new promise to himself. If he wants to survive, he will have to become stronger. With his mind made up, Yamada grips his wooden stick tightly. He knows that since he won't get hungry here, he has all the time in the world to train. He begins to swing the stick over and over and over again. From her library, Ulquiorra watches him, thinking to herself that at least practicing is better than just giving up. A flicker of curiosity crosses her face. She decides to use her appraisal skill on his sacred gear just to see what it really is. Through a magical orb, she observes Yamada walking back and forth, tirelessly swinging his stick, his focus absolute and unbroken. As he swings, the scene grows dark and dramatic. At that moment, no one could have possibly imagined what this simple, repetitive act of training would ultimately lead to. The story cuts to a different scene, where one of the students asks Kisagawa why he hates Yamada so much, since it seems they have known each other for a while. Kisagawa scoffs, his expression darkening with contempt as he begins to explain the deep-seated reason for his dislike. Meanwhile, back in the prison of time, Yamada continues his endless swings, his movements becoming a blur of motion. He counts his swings, reaching 99. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave erupts from where Yamada is training. Ulquiorra is violently knocked off her feet, her eyes wide, with shock as she desperately tries to understand what is happening. She realizes the immense power is coming directly from his sacred gear. As Yamada completes his 100th swing, the true hidden potential of his simple wooden stick begins to be revealed. Back in the Grand Hall, Kisagawa continues his petty explanation. He calls Yamada a social misfit, someone who gets so lost in a single task that he completely ignores the world around him. He clenches his fists in anger, declaring that he absolutely despises incompetent, single-minded people like Yamada. But ironically, that very same trait was now, in this desperate situation, about to reveal its true, incredible power. Yamada keeps swinging, the count now at 1,000. Another, even more powerful blast of energy throws Ulquiorra across the room, sending books flying off the shelves all around her. She looks around in a panic, her mind racing. She remembers the fundamental nature of this place, the prison of time, where the very laws of time are unstable and can be bent. Time can feel long when you're bored, or it can fly by when you're having fun. In this prison, that effect is magnified to an impossible degree for everyone. She thinks to herself that what is happening should be completely impossible under normal circumstances. But what if someone with absolute unbreakable focus were to perform a single action over and over in a place where time itself stretches into infinity? For Yamada, it might feel like only a single moment has passed, but in reality, years or even decades could be flying by. The very ground around him begins to crack under the pressure, and the tiny leaf on his stick starts to grow. Ulquiorra bursts through the library doors, realizing with dawning horror that in theory, thousands of years could have passed in just a few seconds of her time. She runs outside, shouting to ask what all the commotion is about, but her words die in her throat as she stares in utter, mind-numbing disbelief at what she sees. The desolate, rocky ground is completely gone. In its place is a beautiful, lush green meadow. The air itself is filled with a sense of immense time and overwhelming power. Yamada stands in the middle of it all, his clothes tattered and his hair a little longer. He turns and smiles warmly when he sees her, calling out her name. He casually mentions that something feels a little strange. For Ulquiorra, only a few short minutes have passed, but for Yamada and the very world around him, an incredible, impossible amount of time has gone by. He looks at her with a gentle, timeless smile and says that it feels like a long time. A flashback shows a 7-year-old Yamada, completely absorbed in knitting a sweater for his grandfather, working on it from morning until night without a single break. His grandpa gently tells him that while he's happy about the sweater, maybe it's time to take a break and play outside like the other kids. In that single, focused moment of training, an unbelievable 100 million years have passed for Yamada. He finishes his sentence, telling Ulquiorra, "It's been a long time since I last saw you." Back in the memory, his grandpa sighs fondly, realizing that Yamada is so focused on his task that he can't even hear him speaking. He smiles and pats his grandson's head, thinking to himself that if this boy had an infinite amount of time, he would probably just keep doing the same thing forever. And in the prison of time, that's exactly what happened. Ulquiorra stares in awe at a gigantic tree that now towers over the landscape. She recognizes it as an Ayen tree, a mythical tree that takes millennia to mature. Based on its immense size, she estimates it must be at least 100 million years old. She then notices that the tree is covered in countless, neatly carved tally marks. She asks what they are, and Yamada casually explains that he carves one mark every time he completes 10,000 swings. Her mind struggles to comprehend the impossible numbers. It seems completely insane, but the evidence, the giant tree, the countless marks, is right there in front of her. She puts it all together in a stunning, world-altering realization. For 100 million years, this boy has been training without a single break, never once losing his godlike focus. Just then, a large, dark fruit falls from the giant tree and bonks Ulquiorra right on the head. She yelps in pain, and Yamada turns to her, looking confused. In his confusion, he finally notices his own reflection. He shouts in surprise, asking when his clothes became so ripped and worn out. In his deep focus, he hadn't noticed the passage of time at all. Still trying to process everything, Ulquiorra pulls out a scarf-like piece of cloth and hands it to him, telling him to put it on. The moment he touches it, his tattered rags magically transform into a cool set of fantasy-style armor. He looks down at himself in utter amazement. He asks if it's a valuable sacred gear, but Ulquiorra brushes it off, explaining it's just a magical scarf that changes his clothes. She insists she only lent it to him because his tattered look was bothering her. Yamada's face lights up with a radiant, pure smile. He thanks her again, telling her she's a truly kind person. Completely flustered, Ulquiorra turns away and mumbles, "You're welcome." Before she can say another word, Yamada is already turning back to his training spot, asking politely if he can stay here and keep practicing. Ulquiorra shouts for him to wait. She can't believe it. After 100 million years of non-stop training, he wants to train even more? Yamada looks at her, confused, and says of course he does because he's still not strong enough. He explains that if he were to fight the legendary sword god Abel, he thinks he would be lucky to win even 1 out of 100 matches. Ulquiorra just stares at him, her mind completely blank with utter confusion. She stammers, repeating the name Sword God Abel. Yamada looks surprised, asking if she's really never heard of him. She quickly recovers, saying of course she knows him. He's a famous hero from ancient history, the strongest warrior who never lost a single fight. Yamada happily confirms that's the one. A look of deep suspicion crosses her face. She reminds Yamada that sword god Abel was a hero from another world who died thousands of years ago. She asks him pointedly if he's trying to say that he actually fought him. Yamada puts a hand behind his head and gives her a big, cheerful grin. "Yes, we fought," he says happily. "In my imagination." Ulquiorra grabs her head, completely overwhelmed. She cries out that after 100 million years alone, the boy has completely and utterly lost his mind. Yamada just looks back at her, confused by her sudden panic. He wonders if he really did go crazy, but then reassures himself that sword god Abel is a real person. Ulquiorra is sweating, her mind racing. This is bad, she thinks, truly starting to worry about his sanity. The entire situation is so bizarre and impossible that Ulquiorra feels like she's the one who is going crazy. She tries to calm herself down, rubbing her forehead and telling herself to think rationally. But just as she's composing herself, Yamada calls out to her. He is crouched in the grass, pointing to a tiny sprout. He happily asks her if she sees the cute new plant. Ulquiorra just looks at it, completely unimpressed, but then a thought strikes her. Her eyes widen slightly as she says, "Wait!" In the blink of an eye, the tiny sprout shoots up, growing into a small tree right before their very eyes. Ulquiorra screams at the top of her lungs for him to stop, and Yamada jumps back, completely startled by her outburst. He falls to the ground, asking what her problem is. Behind him, the tree, which was just a sprout a second ago, now has a thick, mature trunk. Ulquiorra is in a full-blown panic. She realizes that just by looking away for a second while he focused on the plant, time skipped forward again. She can't believe someone can waste an eternity just by looking at a plant. She tries to explain to him again that time flows differently for everyone here. But as she speaks, the grand library building behind them begins to crack violently. The building suddenly collapses into a massive pile of rubble around them, destroyed by the sudden, violent warping of time and space caused by Yamada's insane focus. Before they can even react to the destruction, a massive shadow falls over them. A giant, terrifying creature has landed just behind them. They turn around and freeze in terror. Towering over them is a colossal, stone-hided beast with glowing, malicious eyes. Ulquiorra recognizes it instantly. An abyss dragon. The sight of the legendary monster is too much for Yamada's timid mind, and he faints on the spot. Ulquiorra realizes with dread that her panic and distraction must have weakened the protective barrier around her home, allowing this ancient beast to break in. With Yamada unconscious and their only shelter completely destroyed, she grits her teeth, knowing she has no choice but to fight. She raises her staff high, summoning an incredible amount of magical power. "Purgatory Hellfire Ball!" she screams, unleashing a massive orb of destructive fire. The dragon takes the full, devastating force of the spell. But when the smoke clears, the beast is completely unharmed, looking only slightly annoyed. Ulquiorra's face falls. "I knew it," she whispers in absolute despair. She knows the terrible truth about this monster. The Abyss Dragon has an absolute defense skill that makes it immune to all attacks. The barrier was the only thing keeping them safe. Realizing she stands no chance of winning, she decides her only option is to grab the unconscious boy and run for her life. But just as she turns to flee, Yamada begins to stir. He slowly gets to his feet and steps in front of her, fearlessly facing the great dragon. "Ichitaro?" Ulquiorra says, her voice filled with complete confusion. The story flashes back to Yamada's long, lonely training. At first, the only creature that appeared before him was a small, weak slime. Over and over and over, the slime would appear, and he would swing his stick, defeating it. It became part of his endless, monotonous routine. But this was not just his imagination playing tricks on him. It was the true, hidden power of his sacred gear. The simple wooden stick could scan and extract all information in the world to create a perfect virtual copy of any enemy for him to fight. This amazing ability is how he was able to train against legendary figures like the sword god Abel for millions upon millions of years. And for someone with Yamada's incredible, almost supernatural ability to focus, getting completely lost in this endless training was only natural. Meanwhile, Ulquiorra's staff is also revealed to be more than it seems. It is a divine artifact from the ancient era when the gods first created the heavens and the earth. Because it was created in the very beginning, before names or concepts even existed, the staff itself was never given a name. But over the millennia, it would come to be known by a very special title. As Yamada prepares to fight, his simple wooden stick transforms. It becomes a beautiful, ornate staff with a blade of pure energy, glowing with unimaginable divine power. This is its true form, the nameless divine staff. Holding the transformed weapon, Yamada now looks like a true hero, his hair and scarf flowing with raw power as he stands fearlessly before the Abyss Dragon. He lunges forward, striking the dragon with a speed and power that seems completely impossible for a human. A system screen appears, just like at the very beginning of the story, identifying the Abyss Dragon and its last battle record, 43,210,123 years ago. As Yamada's hand grips the staff, the system announces, Replication Calculation. Start. He is copying the skills and power of an ancient, forgotten warrior. With a mighty swing, he unleashes two massive blades of pure energy that slice through the air, completely engulfing the colossal dragon. The attack is absolutely overwhelming. The Abyss Dragon is instantly obliterated, torn to pieces by the incredible power of the single, devastating swing. Ulquiorra can only watch, her eyes wide with total disbelief, as the most powerful monster in the dungeon crumbles into nothing more than dust. In a matter of seconds, the terrifying beast is completely and utterly gone. As the dust settles, Yamada's divine staff transforms back into a simple wooden stick. He turns around in the smoky clearing, a look of complete confusion on his face. Rubbing his eyes as if he just woke up from a long nap, he asks, Was I sleeping? Ulquiorra finally finds her voice and lets out a massive, earth-shattering scream that echoes across the ruined landscape. What the heck? Her mind simply cannot handle what she just witnessed. This boy, who couldn't even defeat a simple death bear just a few minutes ago, in her time, just one-shotted an Abyss Dragon. She remembers his sacred gear, the pathetic-looking wooden stick. She thinks back to when she used her appraisal magic on it, just before he started his impossible training. Her appraisal magic is incredibly powerful. It can analyze anything, revealing all of its hidden traits, skills, and weaknesses. Usually, even with powerful S-rank items, there might be a few minor details missing from the analysis. But what she saw when she appraised his stick was something entirely different. No matter how many times she tried, the result was always the same. Her powerful magic couldn't see a single detail about it. The only information that appeared was the title, Divine Artifact of the Age of Gods. For an item to hide its skills so perfectly, it had to be on a level far, far beyond S-rank. Ulquiorra finally puts all the strange pieces together, the timeless nature of the prison, the boy's unbelievably focused personality, and the hidden power of his divine weapon. She realizes they all worked together to create this impossible, terrifying result. Standing over the remains of the dragon, which has been sliced cleanly in two, Yamada asks who could have possibly done such a thing. Ulquiorra screams at the top of her lungs, "It was you!" She asks him if he really doesn't remember anything at all, her mind still reeling from the shock of it all. Yamada smiles sheepishly. He admits that it's embarrassing, but whenever he sees a really scary monster, he gets so frightened that he completely blacks out. Ulquiorra grabs his head in frustration, reminding him that he clearly remembered training with sword god Abel. He explains that his memories are of a kind and gentle Abel. They would do peaceful things together, like making flower crowns. He remembers the friendly, gentle training sessions, not the terrifying life-or-death battles. A wave of sudden understanding washes over Ulquiorra. She finally gets it. She realizes that after 100 million years, his mind created a powerful second personality to protect his timid, gentle self. When faced with extreme fear, this defensive instinct takes over. A powerful, focused warrior without a shred of fear. She clutches her head in despair. She blames herself for this, thinking she has accidentally unleashed an unbelievable godlike monster upon the world. He's just another source of headaches for her. As she frets, Yamada absent-mindedly crushes a large rock into dust with his bare hand, a casual, terrifying display of his newfound immense strength. He turns to her and says that he thinks it's time for him to leave the prison of time. He explains that he can't keep bothering her forever and feels he has already been enough of a burden. He smiles kindly, preparing to say his goodbyes and head off on his own into the dangerous world. But Ulquiorra makes a sudden, life-altering decision. Quietly, but with firm, unwavering resolve, she says, "I'm coming with you." She repeats it, much louder this time, shouting that she is joining him on his journey. Yamada is completely shocked by her sudden and unexpected change of heart. And so, for the first time in centuries, the hermit Ulquiorra decides to leave her self-imposed isolation behind and step back into the outside world, acting as a guide for the boy who had accidentally become a godlike being. She tries to play it cool, telling him she'll show him the ropes and that he'd better be grateful for her help. Yamada thanks her enthusiastically, his face beaming. But deep down in her heart, she knows she is only doing this because she feels responsible. This boy has become far too powerful to be left on his own. She feels her duty is to be his guardian. They stand together, looking at the massive canyon that was carved into the land by his single, terrifying sword slash. Ulquiorra begins to explain the impossible task that lies ahead. This world has 7 legendary dungeons known as the Seven's Fall, and the Prison of Time is the most difficult of them all. Each and every floor is filled with powerful S-rank monsters so strong that even the world's greatest heroes struggle to clear a single level, and their current location is the very bottom, the 250th floor. To escape, they must fight their way through 249 floors of unimaginable constant danger. She holds up a magical information board, showing him the immense daunting scale of the dungeon, and asks if he understands now. Yamada panics, exclaiming that it sounds completely and utterly impossible. Ulquiorra agrees that for any normal person, it would be. But as she looks at Yamada, she thinks to herself that with his unbelievable god-tier abilities, it might just be possible. Yamada, completely missing her point, just says he's relieved to hear that it's impossible for him. He asks her why she would leave her home to come with him on such a hopeless, suicidal journey. She just tells him not to worry about it, avoiding the real reason. With a wave of her hand, she uses her magic to shrink her entire mansion and library down until it fits neatly in the palm of her hand. She looks at the tiny building, making a mental note to fix the parts the dragon destroyed later on. Yamada is amazed by the incredible magic and asks if he can touch the miniature mansion. Ulquiorra nervously tells him no, afraid that his immense, uncontrolled strength might accidentally crush it into dust. As they get ready to leave, Yamada's confidence wavers again. He wonders if a weakling like him can really do anything to help. Ulquiorra looks at him, completely exasperated. She reminds him he just killed an abyss dragon and tells him with his power he could easily become a rich and successful adventurer. The word adventurer sparks a new, exciting dream in Yamada's eyes. Ulquiorra gives him a serious life or death warning. He must never, ever tell anyone that he is the hero abandoned by goddess Kuzuriel. She is an obsessive and cruel being who will surely try to kill him again if she learns he survived. Yamada nods solemnly, understanding the gravity of the situation and the danger he's in. With their plan set, they prepare to begin their long, arduous journey upwards. Ulquiorra estimates it will take them at least a year of constant, brutal fighting to escape. Yamada says, in that case, he'll just try to connect them to the upper floors. She looks at him, completely confused by his strange and cryptic choice of words. Before she can ask, Yamada's staff transforms. He calmly speaks the name of a new technique, dimensional slash. Instantly, a tear in the very fabric of space opens up before them. The sheer force of the technique sends Ulquiorra flying through the air, completely catching her off guard. She scrambles back to her feet, demanding to know what that was, as Yamada calmly walks towards the swirling rift in space. She yells again, asking him what in the world he just did. He smiles and explains that it is a secret art from a swordsmanship style he learned called dimensional slash. He explains that it's a teleportation skill that cuts through space to connect 2 different points. Just as he finishes explaining, the portal vanishes. Ulquiorra's face is a mask of unfiltered, jaw-dropping shock. She yells at him, explaining that teleportation skills are so incredibly rare that almost no one in the entire world can use them, yet he speaks of it so casually as if it were nothing. Yamada just looks surprised. He hadn't realized the skill was so special, and says that it makes sense now why it was so difficult for him to learn. Ulquiorra stares at him, dumbfounded. Wait, you learned that? She asks, her voice trembling. Yamada proudly explains that he received personal training from the great hero Alexander, in his imagination, of course. Behind him, a ghostly image of a powerful warrior appears, giving a confident thumbs up. The name clicks in Ulquiorra's mind. She shouts in disbelief, realizing that Alexander was the legendary knight commander who served the royal family in ancient times. She remembers the epic stories of his youth. Alexander was a warrior of such immense power that the mere mention of his name was enough to keep entire countries from daring to start a war. Yamada admits he had no idea his imaginary teacher was so famous. Ulquiorra can only mutter that amazing doesn't even begin to describe him. Finally, with all the pieces in place, she understands everything. She deduces the sacred gear's true, terrifying skill, the power to create perfect, lifelike simulations of any hero or monster in the user's mind. Her eyes widen as the full, terrifying implication of this power sinks in. For 100 million years, Yamada hadn't just been swinging a stick. He had been fighting and learning from every legendary beast and hero in history. And from this endless, brutal training, his powerful warrior personality was born. Ulquiorra asks him if it never once occurred to him that it was strange to be able to summon anyone he wanted in his imagination. Yamada pauses, thinking about it for the very first time. His eyes go wide as he finally realizes how bizarre it is, shouting, "You're right!" Ulquiorra facepalms, amazed that he's only just now figuring it out. She sighs, telling him that his sacred gear is anything but ordinary. He holds the weapon, which has now transformed into a sword staff, and she explains that it is a divine artifact from the age of the gods, the very highest tier of power in existence. Yamada looks down at his weapon, his expression full of awe as he processes its true, divine identity. Ulquiorra confirms that its divine nature is likely why she could only see its name with her appraisal magic, and how it grants him the unbelievable power to manifest anything in his training simulations. She looks him in the eye, her tone serious and heavy. She tells him that while she won't lecture him on responsibility, he needs to understand the immense, world-breaking power he now wields. She warns him that history has shown that when one person holds too much power, it inevitably leads to war and destruction. She stands tall, her posture radiating a newfound sense of purpose and resolve. She makes a solemn vow. "This time for sure, I won't let you stray from the right path." Yamada looks at her, understanding her deep concern and the heavy weight of his own strength. Then, with a determined look, he lifts his weapon and declares that in that case, he must train even more to control it. Ulquiorra screams for him to stop. She grabs him from behind, yelling that he's already a monster and doesn't need any more training. He argues back that he's still weak, but she shouts that he's comparing himself to legends, which is the wrong way to measure his strength. She tries to wrestle the weapon out of his hands, desperately telling him to let it go. In the chaos, her own staff is knocked to the ground as she tells him to stop being so close to her. She refuses to let go until he promises to stop his insane training. As they struggle, she feels something soft and warm bumping against her leg. Yamada's face turns bright red as he's pressed against her, shouting that all sorts of things are happening. Suddenly, they both freeze, sensing a menacing presence right behind them. It's the death bear from before. They both let out a terrified shriek. Yamada immediately reverts to his timid self, scrambling away from the monster in pure, unadulterated terror. He sits on the ground crying, shouting that he doesn't remember the fight with the abyss dragon. Ulquiorra yells at him, completely baffled that he's terrified of a death bear after everything he's done. Trying to take control of the situation, she says she can handle a simple death bear herself. She stands ready to fight, but then realizes with a jolt of panic that her weapon is gone. She sees her staff lying on the ground, right next to the monster's giant foot. The death bear raises its giant claw, preparing to strike her down. The bear roars as its claw smashes down toward her with lethal force. Ulquiorra's eyes widen in horror and disbelief. She can't believe that after all this, she's going to be taken out by a common monster. At the very last second, Yamada's powerful warrior personality takes over. He moves in a flash, scooping her up and leaping away from the deadly attack. Ulquiorra blushes furiously, stunned to be held so securely in his arms. Her hero lands gracefully a safe distance away from the monster. He sprints away from the monster, carrying her effortlessly as if she weighed nothing. She looks over his shoulder and sees that the enraged death bear is still chasing them. The warrior Yamada stops and sets her down gently. A system screen appears, identifying the new target, the death bear. Once again, the system announces, "Replication calculation, start." In A flash of movement, he leaps onto the charging bear, his overwhelming power on full display. The monster collapses to the ground, defeated in an instant. The battle over, Yamada's warrior self leaps high into the air, his mission complete. The dazed and wounded death bear looks up just in time to see Yamada's powerful form readying his final, devastating attack. A dark aura crackles with lightning as the warrior persona prepares to unleash a secret magic sword technique. He unleashes the thunderclap flash, and a blinding explosion of pure energy erupts, completely engulfing the monster. His powerful alter ego watches calmly as the attack utterly obliterates the death bear. When the blinding light finally fades, there is nothing left but a scorched, empty crater on the ground. Yamada's normal personality returns. He looks around in a panic, his face a mask of fear, and asks where the death bear went. Ulquiorra can only stare at him, completely speechless and exasperated by his convenient amnesia. Yamada, completely clueless, turns to her with a bright, innocent smile and asks if she was the one who defeated the monster. Ulquiorra screams at him, calling him an idiot. Kneeling by the crater, she points to the charred remains and yells that he was the one who did it, and this is the proof. Yamada waves his hands frantically, refusing to believe it, while Ulquiorra loses her mind in frustration over his bizarre and selective memory. Completely exhausted, she lets out a long sigh, wondering what kind of unbelievable, frustrating person she's teamed up with. But then, her expression softens. She looks at him with a blush, and quietly but sincerely thanks him for saving her life again. Yamada smiles, scratching his cheek awkwardly. He says that even though he doesn't remember doing anything, he's just glad they're both okay. Eager to avoid any more monsters, he suggests they get moving and leave this dangerous area immediately. He turns to a cave wall, once again preparing to use his dimensional slash to create a portal to escape. Ulquiorra watches him, silent and looking very worried about where they might end up this time. They stand before the dark, swirling portal. Ulquiorra cautiously asks where it leads. Yamada cheerfully admits he has no idea, but he's sure it's in the up direction. She groans in exasperation, already dreading the inevitable chaos to come. As they step through the portal into the unknown, she has a very, very bad feeling about what awaits them on the other side. The scene cuts to them both soaking wet. Yamada apologizes profusely, thinking it's his fault, but Ulquiorra, looking tired and defeated, tells him to stop apologizing. It turns out his portal opened up directly above a vast, dark underground lake, dropping them right into the freezing cold water. Later, they sit by a small campfire trying to dry their clothes. The unexpected swim has left them both chilled to the bone. Yamada can't help but peek over at Ulquiorra, who is wrapped in a towel, and he blushes at the alluring sight. She catches him looking and angrily tells him to stop staring, making him quickly apologize and look away. As they warm up, Yamada wonders aloud why they're still in the dungeon. He was so sure his portal would connect to the surface. Ulquiorra offers a logical theory, suggesting it's because of the dungeon's unique and twisted nature. She reminds him that the prison of time is a separate world, existing in a rift between space and time itself. Because of this, his dimensional slash can't connect to the true outside world. Instead, it just created a portal to another random location within the same dungeon. The explanation makes perfect sense, and Yamada nods in understanding. His immediate reaction, however, is to declare that he must train even harder to overcome this new obstacle. Ulquiorra screams at him, telling him to stop being such a brat. She jumps up to physically stop him from training again, but in her haste, her towel slips off, revealing everything. Yamada is left frozen, staring with wide, unbelieving eyes. The scene shifts again. A huge, muscular minotaur lies unconscious on the ground. Ulquiorra, now fully dressed again, stares at the new monster in shock. The fiery aura around Yamada's hair flickers and dies out as his powerful warrior persona fades away. His normal, timid self returns, completely confused. He asks what he was just doing. Ulquiorra sighs, thinking that she is getting very, very sick of this routine. Yamada says he feels like he just saw something amazing, but can't remember what it was. Ulquiorra yells at him that he doesn't need to remember it. A brief flashback shows his warrior self effortlessly overpowering the charging minotaur with a single, devastating strike. Back! In the present, Yamada looks at the defeated monster and asks what happened to it. An exhausted Ulquiorra tells him that he was the one who defeated it. She can't help but feel a little bad for the minotaur, admitting that it never stood a chance against his overwhelming, godlike power. Yamada's mind, however, is already on something else entirely. His eyes light up, and he suggests they should have a meal together. Ulquiorra is horrified, realizing he plans to eat the minotaur. Yamada proudly declares that cooking is actually his specialty. She frantically explains that eating monsters is forbidden and incredibly dangerous, as they are highly poisonous if not prepared correctly. But he waves off her concerns with a confident smile, telling her not to worry. He learned how to safely cook monsters from someone named Kirilight. The name sounds strangely and worry familiar to Ulquiorra. She suddenly remembers the infamous abnormal gourmet Kyrie Light, a researcher who dedicated her life to figuring out how to eat every monster in existence. Yamada happily confirms that's her. Ulquiorra is still completely against the idea, pointing out that they don't actually need to eat to survive in this dungeon. Yamada agrees that she is technically right, but he gives her a big, warm smile and says that if they want to truly warm up their bodies and spirits, the best way to start is with a delicious, hot meal. Despite Ulquiorra's protests, Yamada begins skillfully preparing the minotaur. He explains that it's important to remove the poisonous parts in a specific order to avoid contaminating the meat. Next, he carefully mixes hot and regular water over the fire to create a pot of warm water, perfectly heated to around 50 degrees Celsius. He wraps the minotaur meat in large leaves and suspends it in the pot with a string, ensuring it cooks evenly without touching the hot bottom. With all the prep work done, he sits back with a happy sigh, telling Ulquiorra that now all they have to do is wait a few hours. She watches him, still looking very, very skeptical. After a few hours, he proudly announces that the low-temperature boiled minotaur meat is complete. It is served on a large leaf, looking surprisingly delicious. He hands her a portion, explaining that he made a special seasoning paste from mushrooms, small fish, herbs, and rock salt that he found nearby. He looks at her with a bright, expectant smile, but she just stares back, her face a mixture of doubt and utter disgust. Finally giving in to his hopeful expression, she lets out a frustrated sigh and agrees to eat it. She hesitantly picks up a small, dripping piece of the cooked meat. She slowly brings it to her mouth and takes a tiny, tentative bite. Yamada watches her, waiting anxiously for her reaction. Ulquiorra's eyes shoot open in absolute shock. An imaginary handsome minotaur embraces her as she is overwhelmed by the incredible, life-changing flavor. She wonders how it can possibly be so delicious. They both marvel at the meal. Ulquiorra can't believe how unbelievably tender the meat is, and Yamada comments on how well the flavors of the seasoning complement each other. After finishing the entire meal, they both lie back, completely full and satisfied. Ulquiorra gets Yamada's attention, calling his name softly. She thanks him sincerely for the wonderful meal, admitting that she was wrong to doubt him and never knew monster meat could be so delicious. Yamada asks if she likes it, and she confirms that she does. He explains that he was never good at anything, so cooking was the only way he could pay back his grandpa's kindness. The time he spends making food to see others smile is very special to him. He finishes with a heartfelt smile, saying that he absolutely loves cooking for other people. Ulquiorra looks at him with a soft, understanding expression, seeing a new side to him. She smiles, thinking to herself that he really has a bad habit of underestimating his own incredible talents. Yamada is just happy that she enjoyed the meal. Once their clothes are dry, they get dressed and prepare to move on. Yamada is full of energy, cheerfully singing about their goal to reach the surface. A flashback appears, showing Ulquiorra celebrating at a table with two other people, a man and a fox-like woman. She remembers a time when there were three of them at the dinner table, a time filled with smiles, and a hint of sadness crosses her face. As she and Yamada walk away, a large, shadowy creature is shown watching them from a cliff above. It is a massive, dark wolf with glowing eyes and multiple tails, its presence radiating immense power. Their journey is quickly interrupted. Yamada's warrior persona effortlessly cuts down a one-eyed monster that gets in their way. His timid self returns, confused as always. Ulquiorra, now completely used to the routine, simply tells him it's time to move on to the next floor. 10 days pass. They have made incredible progress, but Yamada is starting to feel tired of the endless journey. Ulquiorra is amazed that the man who trained for 100 million years is now complaining after just 10 days. She suggests they take a quick break, and Yamada happily agrees. They both yawn, feeling the fatigue of their constant travel and fighting. They sit down and enjoy some tea that Ulquiorra prepared. Yamada compliments her, saying her tea is always delicious. He then turns to her with a curious expression on his face. He asks her if she had companions before, wondering if she was always alone, even on the surface. She quietly admits that she did have friends, and Yamada eagerly asks what they were like. A shadow passes over her face. She looks down at her teacup, her voice filled with a quiet sadness as she struggles to answer. A fuzzy memory appears of two figures, a man and a foxwoman, cheerfully waving to her. Ulquiorra snaps back to reality, telling Yamada they need to focus on escaping the dungeon, but he quickly gets distracted, saying they must stay vigilant for more monsters. She looks at him, her thoughts still lingering on her lost friends. Yamada, trying to be helpful, begins to tidy up their tea set, talking about the importance of companions. As they talk, a massive, shadowy figure appears behind them, dwarfing them in size. Yamada comments on how this floor seems to have fewer monsters than the others they've passed through. The statement catches Ulquiorra's attention, and a jolt of realization hits her like a bolt of lightning. She asks him to repeat what he just said, her voice filled with a sudden, desperate urgency. He does, and her eyes widen with dawning horror. She remembers that this floor used to be so infested with monsters that it was like a living hell. She realizes it couldn't have just become a safe zone over time. Yamada notices her sudden change in mood and calls out to her, concerned. Panicked, she grabs his arm and yells that they have to leave, right now. She explains that if her theory is correct, the reason there are no small monsters is because a single, terrifyingly strong monster has taken over the entire floor, killing everything else. As she speaks, a huge, shadowy claw descends behind them. She warns that the monster could be right next to them. It's too late. A massive explosion erupts right where they were sitting, throwing Ulquiorra forward. She looks back in shock to see Yamada shielding himself from the blast. From the smoke and dust, a gigantic, majestic white wolf emerges, its presence radiating an immense, ancient power. Ulquiorra is frozen in terror, unable to believe what she's seeing. The wolf looks down on them with an air of ancient authority, and she knows for certain what it is. But Yamada, completely unafraid, claps his hands with glee and exclaims, "Wow, it's a huge doggy." Ulquiorra screams at him, baffled by his complete lack of fear. She frantically corrects him, shouting that it's the legendary monster, Fenrir. Yamada just looks confused, repeating the name. Ulquiorra explains that Fenrir is the Wolf King, a creature so powerful it could rival the entire Holy Knight Order of a country all by itself. Ignoring her desperate warnings, Yamada walks right up to the giant beast and starts petting its leg, commenting on how soft and fluffy its fur is. Ulquiorra panics, wondering why Yamada's powerful alter ego isn't taking over. He seems completely defenseless against this terrifying monster. She pleads with him to get away from it before it's too late. Just as she speaks, Fenrir lunges forward and snatches Yamada up in its massive jaws. Ulquiorra screams his name, her face pale with terror. But then, the wolf speaks, its voice deep and ancient. It calmly greets Ulquiorra, saying it has been a long time. Ulquiorra is completely stunned into silence, her mind unable to process what's happening. She stares at the talking wolf, her mind racing as she whispers, "It cannot be." The wolf opens its mouth, and Yamada's warrior persona emerges, completely unharmed. Fenrir comments that it was quite a dramatic reunion. The warrior casually sits on Fenrir's head, remarking that the play bite was a bit rough. With a ninja-like hand sign, he mentions a special technique he used, a shadow shift or a body substitution jutsu, which allowed him to escape being bitten. Ulquiorra rushes over, filled with overwhelming relief that he's okay. The warrior calmly admits he's not very good at that particular skill, while Ulquiorra is still trying to process the fact that the giant wolf can talk. Fenrir growls, annoyed that this mere human dares to sit on its back so casually. It declares his insolence is unforgivable and lunges to attack him. The wolf unleashes its signature move, Claw Bash, a powerful attack meant to be a killing blow. The warrior is thrown into the air by the immense force of the attack. Ulquiorra panics, thinking that even his demon mode won't be able to withstand such a powerful hit. She knows he has no way to dodge while suspended in the air, but the warrior proves her wrong, using a wind-based technique called airwalk to kick off the air itself and change his direction mid-flight. Ulquiorra is amazed that he has yet another incredible, legendary skill up his sleeve. He explains that the Fuma style he learned in his training is focused on high-speed movement, making it difficult for simple half-baked attacks to even touch him. Enraged at being called half-baked, Fenrir prepares to unleash its true, devastating power. It roars, promising an attack that will leave no survivors. Ulquiorra feels a terrifying amount of magical energy gathering around the beast. She recognizes the stance and knows with dawning dread what's coming next. She yells a desperate warning to Yamada, telling him to dodge the massive beam of destructive light at all costs. Fenrir gathers its power, preparing its ultimate secret art. It unleashes the Howling Nova, a colossal wave of pure energy that tears through the dungeon floor, vaporizing everything in its path. The warrior stands his ground, calmly facing the devastating blast head-on. Ulquiorra screams his name, certain that he will be vaporized, but he calmly reassures her, preparing a secret technique of his own. He unleashes his Dimension Counter, a skill that creates a mirrored portal to reflect any and all attacks. Fenrir watches in horror as its own massive beam of energy is turned right back at it. The wolf screams in disbelief, "Impossible!" The warrior coldly tells Fenrir that it will be defeated by its own power. With the command, "Sink into the void," the reflected attack slams into the Wolf King. The blast carves a massive path of destruction through the stone ruins of the dungeon floor. Fenrir is thrown back, crashing hard into the rubble, its body smoking. The proud and powerful beast lies on the ground, wounded and utterly defeated. It looks up at the warrior standing over it, wondering what kind of man could possess such incredible, impossible power. The warrior raises his sword staff, preparing to deliver the final, killing blow. But Ulquiorra rushes forward, placing herself between him and the wolf, desperately telling him to wait. The warrior stops, his expression cold and questioning, his blade held inches from its target. Ulquiorra looks at him, then at the defeated wolf on the ground. She takes a deep breath, her voice trembling with raw emotion as she explains. With tears welling in her eyes, she reveals the stunning, heartbreaking truth. "This Fenrir is probably my companion."